Hi, and welcome to Creating a Life You Love with Adriana, where we talk about all things how to create a healthy lifestyle centered on the Lord, whether that's in your relationships, your mental health, the breakup you're going through, whatever it is, we talk about it here. And anxiety is one of those things that I feel like all of us can kind of relate to, whether it's your everyday kind of like anxiety or you truly have that every single, minute, every waking moment you're up and you're experiencing panic attacks and things like that. I've talked about anxiety before. About a year ago, I did a podcast on it, and even though my advice stays the same, so if you listen to that and you're thinking like, "Wait, should I not have taken that advice?" My advice is the same now that it has been. However, I feel like it's nice to kind of do like a little refresher on where I'm at now in my mental health because I've struggled with anxiety of different sorts. And I feel like it's helpful to just kind of revisit that topic every so often. Um, when I was younger, I experienced social anxiety. And so I kind of wanted to start there if you don't know my story or you want a little bit of a refresher just so you can see if I'm a little bit like know what I'm talking about here. I'm going to give it to you. So yeah, social anxiety is kind of where it started. I feel like when I was growing up, I was very focused on my looks, focused on how other people perceived me. And I specifically remember there was this one moment where I was going out to eat at like one of those, quick get in line places like a Chipotle or something like that. And I was feeling very insecure of how I looked. I remember thinking, I had just gotten off the boat with a friend and my hair was all gross. The salt was like sticking to my face. I thought my legs looked very weird. I was wearing like these shorts that I didn't like, and my body, how they looked on them. And so I was very anxious to begin with. And I step inside this, store or this food place and I see someone that I know that I kind of idolize because her looks are amazing and I kind of am jealous of her. And all of a sudden, I start having these anxious thoughts that I just can't get a grip. And I'm spiraling and I'm thinking, like, oh, what is she thinking of me? Oh my gosh, I look horrible. And then it's spiraling into even like such worse things of like, oh, who would ever want to be with me? I look so ugly, right? All these things. And then finally, like, I get my food, I get in the car, and then I have like a full on panic attack all because of this one thing of my looks. And so social anxiety kind of started around maybe like 11, 12, really like those formative like teen years. And it was really all about my looks. I would spend hours a day like trying to perfect myself. I would go to the bathroom after every single class to make sure I looked good. And so it was this obsession with wanting to look good and this anxiety associated with what will other people think of me. And it really hurt me. I mean, I remember I was in class and I was like pinching my cheeks because I thought that I looked really good with rosy cheeks. It brought some color to my face, and, like, obviously, it's nice if you have a little bit of blush on, but my blush wore off, like, halfway through the school day. Crazy, right? Like, the lengths that I went to cope with this anxiousness I felt about my appearance, and so that's kind of where it started for me. However, that's not actually where it started for me because it was later revealed. So, once I kind of got out of that, obsession with my looks, I realized I had a phobia that I had stuffed down for so long. And this is called emetophobia. If you don't know what that is, feel free to go look it up. I'm not going to explain it right here, but essentially, it's a fear of you or someone else getting sick. Not going to be explicit here and say all the terms, but that is that. And when I was finally kind of overcoming this social anxiety, I started to become very aware that I constantly had this like little voice in my head telling me, "Oh, maybe don't eat that. You could get food poisoning. Oh, don't go out to that restaurant. Oh, never go to the bathroom when you go to restaurants because you never know who might be in there and if someone might be sick." All these little things of like you must shower, you can't go outside after you've showered. You can't sit on any things in your house if someone else has sat on them and they weren't showered. Like all of these things, these rules that I had made up in my head that I always thought were normal. Like I thought it was normal to avoid bathrooms in public places because you have a deathly fear of them. Totally thought that was normal. It wasn't. And so over time, with a friend's help, I started realizing that wasn't normal. And I should go see someone. So I kind of started looking up my symptoms online. Maybe I was like 14 at the time. And it appeared I had emetophobia. So I was talking to a therapist about it. Turns out I did have that. And this started me identifying with this anxiety because before it was kind of like, oh, yeah, like I get scared of this and like I don't like crowded places, but like I can't really pinpoint it. I don't really know exactly what. And then all of a sudden I pinpointed it and then I was like labeling myself. And so this is the first thing that I wanted to talk about. When you label yourself with a certain diagnosis, you can start to identify with that. And of course, I'm not saying like, oh, you don't really have anxiety. Like that's not true. But what I'm saying is, I noticed myself. I started to continue to say like, oh, I just have anxiety. Oh, I just have emetophobia. Like continually saying that. I didn't really like think anything else was possible. I just kind of was that person who had anxiety, if that makes sense. So anyway, that was my first like real experience with like heavily being diagnosed with something and then like having that label on myself. And this started, a rabbit hole of, okay, well, like, who else has this emetophobia? And it's quite common. I mean, there's so many phobias out there, and it all stems back to, anxiety and OCD tendencies are also a part of that. And yeah, from there, the emetophobia prevented me from just it didn't prevent me from, like, going to work and, like, going on a plane, but I had severe anxiety with that, and so if I had to travel, like, I will, but I didn't prefer it, and if someone coughed or if I was, like, somewhere where there wasn't, like, an easy exit, I would kind of start to freak out. I definitely never wanted to go on a cruise or anything like that where, things like people getting sick happen and then you can't escape. That's why planes are so fearful for me. Anyway, so I labeled myself with anxiety and with emetophobia. And as time went on, I was maybe 14, 15, 16. I started trying to work on exposure therapy and expose myself by watching certain clips or reading certain things that had my trigger in it. This didn't work though because the exposure therapy got boring. Not boring, but like I hated doing it. So I just stopped. And this is when I started to realize I also actually did hypnosis as a form of therapy. I did EMDR. None of it was really like working for me, at least. And so finally, I met Christopher. Um, and I met Christopher in, let's see, 2023. And we were talking just as friends. And he was like, hey, have you ever tried prayer for emetophobia? And I'm like, of course I have, like, duh. And then I really got to thinking about it. And honestly, I hadn't. Like, when I was anxious, I didn't really look to God. And if I did, it would be a quick, like, help me get out of the situation now. It wouldn't be like, help me overcome this so I don't have to experience this anymore. I just wanted to, like, flee, you know? And so that kind of got me thinking, wait a minute. I've had anxiety of different sorts throughout my life. And when have I brought the Lord into it? And, 2021 is when I started, like, growing closer with God, and 2023 was when Christopher and I met, and I had a lot of things that, I needed to work on that kind of came up in conversation, and one of those, was anxiety, and so over the next few months, I started really thinking about what he had said and trying to put some tools into practice. And then throughout the years, it's taking us to 2025, I thought that I was having a better grip on anxiety as 2023 went on until Christopher and I went through a breakup, and then the breakup brought anxiety, but then I was able to overcome that. That was good. Then Christopher and I get in a relationship, and I start having anxiety again. And this time it's relationship anxiety. This time it's, Lord, what if I'm not doing what you want me to do? What if he's not the one? Oh my gosh, I'm freaking out. What do I do? So I'm going to go back to all of these anxieties and kind of how I fixed them. Oh, there's one more too. I've also experienced anxiety due to sin. When you are doing something that goes against what the Lord wants you to do, your spirit might be unsettled. And so you might have this anxious kind of feeling. And that's something that I also experienced as well. So, with all of these things, the social anxiety, metaphobia, relationship anxiety, anxiety due to sin, and the daily anxieties that come up when it's like, oh, I have to public speak, or I have to. submit to this assignment and I'm not even started at all. When it comes to all of that, there are a few things that I wanted to talk about have helped me. And then at the end, I'll kind of go into where I'm at with all of these different categories of anxiety. But I think what's really important for me, at least, the more I started growing in my relationship with God, the more I understood how God sees anxiety. So, anxiety is one of those things that I feel like maybe our parents, like as Gen Z, our parents maybe were taught like, you're not supposed to talk about your mental health, you're not supposed to do this, therapy is for the weak, all of these things. Now I don't think that is a healthy view. I also don't think it's healthy to constantly identify with your problems, which is, I kind of think our generation, like my generation Z, or millennials too, have kind of like identified. We've gone on the opposite spectrum where like we are our mental illnesses, and that's like the only cool thing about us, kind of. So we kind of gone on this far end of the spectrum. That's at least how I see it online. Not necessarily in my friend group, but like even me, I've found that anxiety can start to like kind of take over and I can start to identify with it. So I have to be careful of that. Anyway, I think God sees anxiety as not this thing of saying, just get over it, put your big kid pants on, you're fine. He wants to sit with us in our pain, but he doesn't want to let us sit there forever. In Psalm 116, 1 through 2, it says, I love the Lord, for he heard my voice. He has heard my cry for mercy. Because he turned his ear to me, I will call on him as long as I live. And so this is essentially David saying that the Lord hears his cries, the Lord goes to him. And so it's not this idea of like we shouldn't be scared to show our emotions to the Lord. Maybe you grew up in a household where like you weren't supposed to show your emotions and you were weak if you did. And I don't think that's the case. The Bible clearly shows all these different people giving their emotions to the Lord. I mean, if you read through the entire book of Psalms, you will see David had a lot of issues and he kept bringing it to the Lord. He didn't stuff it down. He kept seeking him. And I feel like that's very important to understand. Like the Lord isn't annoyed with you for bringing your problems to him. In First Peter 5 7, it specifically instructs us to cast our cares on the Lord. It says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Roman in Psalm 46 1, it says he's our refuge and our present help. So he's somewhere that we can go and we can find a safe place. Overall, we see that the Lord, he doesn't minimize anxiety. He invites us to bring it to him. Anxiety itself is a signal. It shows something deeper is going on, like fear, control, lack of trust. And I think it's important to acknowledge that if you are living in anxiety, that is sin. Of course, the Lord has compassion on us and sees, maybe different trials that we've endured through our childhood have caused us to be anxious people. The sin going on in the world to us, from us, done all around us is contributing to our anxiety. So he sees that and he's not condemning us for anxious living anxiously, but he wants more for us. And so I think we have to understand that we don't have to live in this victim mentality of, oh, well, I was diagnosed with anxiety and like this is just what I have. And like, that's okay. Like, it's okay that I have this. Like, yes, it's okay that you have this, but it's going to be even better if you're able to overcome it. And when I say overcome it, I'm not saying you're never going to have an anxious thought again. You may certainly. And to actually add some light on that, I was doing pretty good this year with my anxiety. But this August, my absolute worst fear ever happened. So, my mental state before getting on the plane in August was not very good. I was very bitter towards the Lord. I was very annoyed. Some things weren't going my way. And so I wasn't in like a prayerful state. And so I am frustrated at my husband. I'm kind of like being annoyed, giving him some attitude because I'm annoyed at my own problems. And I happen to notice something that anyone with maybe, emetophobia would notice, which is a little kid saying he doesn't feel well. Ooh, red flag. Immediate, I'm nervous. But because I was so frustrated, I was kind of like, "Ah, whatever, like it's fine." I kind of pushed it off. Then I start to see him more and more. He's crying. His mom is giving him like medication. The thing with anxiety is it makes you very selfish and it can almost make you have zero empathy when you are on high alert. Like for me, if someone is triggering my emetophobia, they're like, "I have no empathy for you because I am triggered and all I need to do is protect myself and flee." And so that's something that I can struggle with, and I have not great thoughts about someone else who's triggering my anxiety. So anyway, I noticed that kid and then, you know, our flight is delayed an hour and I'm like, "Oh, great." And I'm frustrated even more, but then I'm like, "Okay, it's fine, I'm dealing with it. It's okay." That's actually not how it went. I kept complaining to Christopher. Anyway, so finally we decided to board. Well, we don't decide to board. The airline is like, finally, you can board. So we board. We're getting on. I'm literally about to step foot on the plane when it is announced, uh, well, something happened. My worst fear. That kid who apparently he had a stomach ache, you know what happens next on the plane, right? So they're like, oh, we got to clean the plane. This is horrible, everyone get off, right? I'm so grateful that I wasn't on the plane, but immediately I was frozen. I was like absolutely shook. I could not speak. I had no words. And then I flee and I like walk off the, little hallway tarmac, is that what it's called for the plane? Connects the airlines to the plane. Anyway, I walk out of there practically running and I'm like, I'm not getting on that plane. I'm not getting on the plane. And so I'm telling Christopher, I am not going. I'm not getting on that plane. Absolutely not. Not getting on the plane. I keep repeating that over and over again. Not getting on the plane, not getting on the plane, not getting on the plane. And he's like, well, what do you mean? Like, we kind of have to go. Um, the other flight isn't out till tomorrow, and then we're going to miss the event that we're going for if we don't leave tonight. And so he was kind of frustrated because I was also not treating him very nicely before this whole thing happened. My anxiety was like all consuming. Now, I say this to say that just because you think that you are okay doesn't mean that you won't experience triggers. I thought that I was fine because I hadn't experienced the certain triggers that cause my the anxiety I experienced to go crazy. And this experience was very revealing to when anxiety occurs, I do not go to the Lord. And I don't think I went to the Lord also because I wasn't practicing that throughout the days before. And this is something that is very important because in order to overcome anxiety, to beat anxiety, we have to not only we have to have our mind set on the Lord when we don't have anxiety. When you get in a state of anxiousness, you are going to naturally go towards the thing that you usually do. So, what's really important is that we set our minds to the Lord when we don't have anxiety, so that when we do, our natural place is to go to God. And that's what I hadn't been doing. Honestly, the past weeks, I had been kind of like annoyed at God, and it was not translating well to when I had this anxiety because I was not going to Him. Anyway, I finally I get on the plane. Spoiler alert, I get on the plane. My heart is beating out of my chest. I was like, I could not believe I was going to do this. I was freaking out. Let me tell you how I got on the plane. I got on the plane closing my eyes. Don't know why I need to close my eyes. I closed my eyes and I held on to Christopher's backpack in front of me and was like this the whole time, like looking down, my eyes closed, like this. Oh my goodness. It was like out of a movie. My heart was beating so fast, but I did it. I got on the plane. I got on the plane and I was okay. I was okay. Now, when I got on the plane and I was out of this like survival mode, well, I was still in survival mode, but like not as on edge, I was able to pray and seek the Lord. And I didn't have any more bitterness towards him because I just needed him. I needed him to get through this 4-hour flight and not think about what just happened on the plane and what could possibly happen again. Because I was really freaking out. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen like while we're in the air. This is not good. Anyway, so during that flight, I decided I needed to go to the Lord. Um, and this is how I have been trying to approach anxiety when it comes. Um, and it's not just for these moments that you have an overwhelming amount of anxiety, your heart's beating out of your chest. It's also for the everyday worries. So if you're someone who doesn't experience like an extreme amount of panic and you don't have maybe like a certain phobia, or maybe you're fine on planes, maybe you're fine on boats, but your anxiety is about your career or going through a breakup, if it is that, this can still work for you. One thing I've learned is that when you neglect your health, it eventually affects your relationships, whether it's burnout, low energy, or feeling disconnected. And that's why I've made self care a priority, especially when it comes to what I put in my body. For the past 2 years, I've been taking the free diet collagen from Natural Medicine Formulas. And it's one supplement I've stuck with because it's clean, effective, and it actually works. Even if you think you're doing the right thing by taking supplements, sometimes there's hidden fillers and artificial ingredients that could be doing more harm than good. The free diet collagen is different, just high quality ingredients that support your skin, joints, and overall health. My nails used to be brittle and weak, and now I was actually able to grow them out enough to where I could have my natural nails for my wedding. It's super easy to use too. I'll just mix it into my morning water, tea, or coffee, or matcha. So if you want to support your body from the inside out too, head to naturalmedicineformulas.com and try it for yourself and use code Adriana for 10% off. In Philippians 4, 6, Paul is talking about anxiety and kind of like the context of this. Paul has been imprisoned. He has been beaten. He has been through so many different trials, and he is talking about how not to be anxious. So, the perfect guy for talking about how not to be anxious. He's dealing with all these trials. Um, Essentially, what it says, Philippians 4 6 through 7, it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." God essentially gives us a plan for how to combat anxiety. Um, First, we are supposed to pray. We are supposed to ask God for what we need, submit our requests to Him. So instead of spiraling and having all of the images and thoughts come up, I know sometimes it's really hard to stop that. But instead of doing that, maybe take a second and just give those images to the Lord. Imagine in your mind all of these scary images that you're thinking, or words or phrases, however you think, to just go to the Lord. Like you're sending it in like a postcard, you're sending it in a text message, like whatever it is, you're just sending it to the Lord and you're asking Him, please help me right now. I am struggling. Like whatever it is, you're telling Him. Yes, He already knows, but it's very helpful to just put it out in words or put it out in writing. You can even journal your prayers to the Lord. Um, so you're going to pray and then you're going to be thankful. Really ironic because when you're anxious, like what is there to be grateful for? But there are still things to be grateful for, right? When I was on the plane kind of freaking out, I could say, "Well, God, I'm so grateful that I have family that can support me when I have anxiety. I am so grateful that I'm not completely alone. I'm very grateful that I can get away on a vacation, even if this vacation doesn't have a really great start." So I could look for things to be grateful for. Now, you may not find very many if you're in an extreme state of anxiety, but it is really helpful if you can think of at least one. Then you're going to renew your mind. So, this is something that is in Philippians 4 8. It says, "And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true, honorable, right, pure, lovely, and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting them into practice, all you've learned and received from me, everything you've heard from me and saw me doing, and then the God of peace will be with you." So we are supposed to renew our minds. When anxiety comes, it's really easy to try to cope by going on our phones or um, by watching things that maybe calm us down. And no, that isn't like necessarily a bad thing. I mean, depending on what you're watching or listening to or whatever. But I think it's important that we set our minds whenever we do have anxiety to something that is pure, honorable, right, not things that are going to maybe make us feel fine in the moment, but then not have a good results and not produce fruit in our lives. Um, so if you are having extreme anxiety about maybe like a job, you don't know what you're doing, write that down and ask the Lord to renew your thoughts. Maybe you're thinking from a very worldly lens of like, oh, I'm not going to make as much money as before. Maybe you can ask the Lord to renew your mind to see if there's any way that you're thinking not in alignment with him. Um, and maybe there's some scripture that you can meditate on. That's also a really important thing when you are in a state of anxiety to kind of have something to keep repeating. So, something that I like to go over when I am on the plane is Psalm 23, where it says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." So it continues to go on. It's just a very comforting psalm. And I think that's really important to have something to focus your mind on to when you're in this state of anxiety. Now, what I did on the plane, I'm pretty sure I watched a movie. I did pray before that, but I watched a movie and I don't know if that's inherently wrong. Like, I think if it's a joyful movie, it brings you joy, great. Like, that's something to keep your mind on. But I think it's also important that we are renewing our mind and not filling it with bad things. So if I was to watch a movie that was like a horror film, or maybe it had a lot of, I don't know, sexual scenes that are very lustful and are feeding into, different passions and desires I have that are, not very good. Obviously, in marriage, they are good, but if it's towards another person outside of your marriage, not great. So that's why I tend to not watch heavily romantic scenes in movies, intimate scenes. Anyway, so like that's something that I shouldn't be watching, especially if I'm having anxiety, because it's not renewing my mind. I'm choosing to cope and look at something that may make me feel good in the moment, but not long term. And so I think that's really important. When you have anxiety, what are you doing? What are you going to try to calm that down? Is it you're going to alcohol? Maybe you're not getting drunk, but you're having a few glasses just to calm you down, but you're not going to God first. I think that's also important. Just because it's not a sin in scripture, like directly saying, do not have a few drinks of alcohol if you are anxious. Just because it's not in there doesn't mean that we should be doing it. I think ultimately we should go to the Lord first for any problem that we're having. And if we're going to our phone first, or we're going to other people, even if it's not directly in scripture, of even if it's not inherently a sin to go to your friend when you need help, it could be if you choose her advice and her input over what you know the Lord is telling you to do. So I think that's also really important. What was I talking about here? Oh, yes, the movie. I was watching a movie on the plane. So anyway, I forget what it was. It was some like, oh, it was Cinderella. It was the Cinderella movie. So I just liked watching that. It was like very lighthearted, right? And it did help me. However, the rest of the trip, I did not seek the Lord and I kind of took it out on other people. And I had to say some apologies after because I was not very nice to Christopher. And, yeah, so that's something that I realized that was revealed to me on the trip, that when that I have not learned how to handle the emetophobia. When the main trigger comes, I have not learned to handle it as well as I thought I had. And it was revealing. It was helpful because now I know I still have some work to do. And also, when I'm going to go on a flight, my heart better be right with the Lord, because if I have anxiety, I need to go to Him immediately, or the rest of my trip could be ruined. So yeah, I think something that's really important is when anxiety hits, do you pause and remember who God is? Do you pause and remember that He has control. So anything you're going through now had to pass through Him first. The enemy had to approve it essentially to be like, hey, can I send this trigger to Adriana? And the Lord had to say, yeah, okay. Just like in Job, Satan asks if he can do these horrible things to Job and take his life away, essentially. Not kill him, but take his beautiful life away. And the Lord approves that. And what ends up happening is Job's faith is tested and it's proved that he truly has full allegiance with the Lord and he truly loves him. And so I think sometimes the Lord will test us so that our faith grows. What's that one verse in? Oh, first, it's in James 1, 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And so when I think to different trials that I've endured and how it's transformed my character, I'm very grateful for them because I'm like, wow, I was not as mature before that I am now, and I'm obviously still growing and still learning, but I can look back and be very grateful for the triggers of my anxiety, even though in the moment it's absolutely brutal. But yeah, do you remember who God is when anxiety hits? Do you remember that he is a God of love and peace, and we can go to him when we have anxiety. We don't need to be ashamed. We don't need to be scared that he's going to judge us, because he won't. And yeah. But if you are struggling with anxiety and you haven't told anyone about it, this is really important. In James 5:16, it says, "Confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed." And so if there's a certain thing that you're really struggling with, I know I said earlier that it could be a sin to continuously go to your friend before you go to God. But I just mean that in the way of like, are you seeking your friend's opinion and the Lord's, or are you just going and ranting to your friend and playing into this victim mindset, just trying to not even get advice, but just like rant everything out, Like that's not necessarily healthy. Anyway, but when it says confess your sin to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed, do you have someone in your life, whether it's like a mentor or a friend or a parent or a therapist? I think it's also important not just to have a therapist you go to, but also friends in your everyday life that can like help you if you're struggling in a moment and that know what you're going through. Um, Confess with them. It might be hard. Maybe you don't really have friends in your life that you feel like could support you. And so maybe this is your sign to try to make some other friends that can support you more in that, or maybe emotionally more mature. But yeah, I think it's really important to have that community in your life. But with that being said, when your friends are praying for you and they're praying for the anxiety you're experiencing to go away or for you to overcome it and trust the Lord instead, we also cannot pray for what you want to keep. And what I mean by this, if you are praying, you're asking a friend to pray for you because you're feeling really anxious, and then you go to a restaurant and you start drinking a ton to try to cope. And then maybe you're going to the club on the weekends, or you're going partying and you're drinking and drinking and drinking, right? You're asking the Lord to heal your anxiety, yet you are doing the complete opposite of that. Number one, we know scientifically that alcohol raises your cortisol and thus causing you anxiety. So, objectively, we know alcohol is going to give you more anxiety, even if it feels like it's taking off the edge in the moment. Now, from a spiritual perspective, if you are praying for God to remove something in your life, yet you are living a life that's apart from Him. You are living in the world. You are actively participating in hookup culture. You are actively getting drunk, which is not good to do because we were supposed to have control of our own body. And when you're drunk, you do not. If we are doing those things, we are living in sin. And so we have the free will and we can kind of overwrite, in a way, our prayers. And so that's something that I think is really important. When I mentioned earlier, living in sin caused me anxiety. When I was praying for the Lord to give me peace, when I was in a relationship that wasn't honoring to Him, I wasn't going to get that peace until I left that relationship. Then that relationship ended. I finally had peace, you know? And I think it's really important to point that out because so many times we can get mad at God for not giving us peace. Like, God, why do I still have this anxiety? Why do I still have this anxiety? When really there's something in our life that we need to let go of before God can remove our anxiety. It's kind of like a natural result. Like when you live closer to God and you stop living so much in the world, naturally you will get more peace. But if you are participating in the things of this world, you are going to feel more anxiety naturally because those are the things that God is specifically against. And so I think it's just very important to acknowledge that because that's something that I didn't acknowledge. And so for a while I was having that anxiety. Another thing that's really helpful, I'm kind of just like listing out tools here for my social anxiety. For anxiety in general, I think it's really important that you get to the root of your anxiety. Like, why are you experiencing this? For my social anxiety, for instance, it was coming from my looks. I was idolizing my looks. And so the more I grew in my relationship with God, the more the social anxiety got better because I wasn't so focused on my looks. So then I could go out in public and if I looked terrible, I'd be like, who cares? Like, yes, I feel better when my hair is brushed and when it's like neat. But if my hair doesn't look like all the girls on other podcasts, which it doesn't, and sometimes I'm like, darn it, I wish my hair was like that full and, held a curl, whatever. If I start thinking that, I then will shift it to, wait a minute, does it really matter because I've grown closer to God and every day, I'm focused on whether we're reading my Bible or journaling or just taking in what God says about me, I now can automatically say, it doesn't matter if my hair doesn't look like theirs. I'm not going to let that ruin my day. There are so much more important things than my looks, and that's okay. And so this is another thing, the more you invest in your relationship with God, in the mundane moments, in the times you wake up early in the morning to spend with Him, when you go to bed and you make sure you're setting your mind to Him, the easier it will get to overcome your anxiety when it comes. So, like I said, the social anxiety, I'm not having panic attacks because I'm fearful of what people think of me anymore, because every single day I'm listening to what the Lord says about me. And I am taking it in. And now I just know that that is truth and the lies that I have about my looks, well, they're lies, right? And that's another thing, I just saw on Instagram the other day, you don't remember every meal you eat, but you know that every time you eat, it nourishes you. And so kind of showing like I think it was kind of showing you're not going to remember all the time you spent with the Lord and, every day what scripture you read, what God taught you. But over time, you're going to be more and more nourished the more you eat a meal or the more you spend with God, if that makes sense. So, yeah, to kind of recap, you are not your anxiety. If you are identifying with it and you constantly say phrases like, oh, it's just my anxiety, or like, I'm just so anxious, and you keep saying that, ask the Lord to help renew your mind so you don't constantly say that about yourself. And try to go over Philippians 4, 6 through 8. I think it's even 6 through 12, I believe. Philippians 4, just read the whole thing. It is so helpful just for anxiety. Paul literally gives us like this structured thing of what to do. And I know it might seem way too simple. It may seem like, what is this going to do? This is just like some hack that's not going to work. It really does, but it's about like over time how it works and how it renews your mind. At first, it may seem kind of silly to do in the midst of your anxiety, but as time gets on, it will get better and it will get easier. And I know that because good news, I've traveled on a plane ever since that experience in August. I've traveled on a plane, I think, 4 times after that, maybe three. Um, and I did great. And I was so grateful. I prayed, I was close to the Lord. It was so funny because that trip in August, I literally said, I'm never flying again. I said, I'm never flying again. 3 weeks later, I had to fly somewhere for a wedding and I flew and I was fine. And I realized that that trigger made me stronger and it made me stronger in my relationship to the Lord. So now when I'm going to the airport, I'm constantly in prayer. I'm seeking the Lord. My anxiety is bringing me closer to the Lord, which is pretty cool. He's using this bad thing to transform my heart into someone who is more kind and more patient and gentle. Not all the time. I still have my moments, but like it is objectively true how I have been able to better handle myself on planes, and with that, I'm more kind to the person next to me. I can make conversation. The other day, I was flying back and I heard a person coughing in front of me, and I was kind of freaking out because I was like, oh my gosh, they're coughing. Normally, I would put my earbuds in, blast the music so I don't hear them. But this time, I said, you know what? I'm going to lean into it. I'm going to lean into it. I'm going to listen to them coughing and be like, you know what? It is okay. It is okay. And I just prayed and the coughing didn't stop. But then it got better and it was fine. And I was like, okay, I'm good. No one's getting sick. But that's just an example of like anxiety is making me stronger. If we don't let it win. And I think the enemy can definitely um use your anxiety to make you doubt God's goodness, his timing, his plan. I think the enemy can kind of distract us. He wants to make us feel alone, isolate us, all of these things. And we have to know that the enemy is using anxiety. So when we try to entertain it and we try to identify with it, we are agreeing with the enemy of like our anxiety is who we are, which is very untrue. Oh, that was a lot to say. With all of this being said, though, I hope there is something that you could take away from this. I've been kind of like rushing through the end of this podcast because my computer is about to die and I don't have my charger working at the moment. So, a lot of technical difficulties today. There have been microphone wasn't working, then the camera wasn't working, all these things. But thanks for bearing with me. Thanks for listening. And I hope this was able to help you. If you do have someone in your life who's dealing with anxiety or you yourself are dealing with anxiety, I hope that this could be beneficial to you. And there's also this book that I just read on anxiety called Attacking Anxiety by Sean Johnson. And, this was a book that I actually read in August that I would definitely recommend if you are someone who experiences anxiety a lot. He had debilitating anxiety, and he actually had to take time off from being a pastor because of it. Crazy. So that's a good book if you wanna go more in depth. A lot of the advice and things I'm saying here are things he talks about in that book. But yeah, with all that being said, thanks for joining me today. If you have any questions, any thoughts, comments, feel free to comment down below. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. And yeah, make sure you're following, subscribe. But with all that being said, I thank you so much for joining me today, and I will talk to you on the next podcast. But until then, I hope we can kick anxiety to the side and continue to create a life we love together. All right, bye bye.